Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Last night was hopefully the last really cold night of winter. It went down to minus 23 degrees Celsius. Whew, kind of cold. So it's quite cold in the plant room here. When I got up this morning, it was 10 degrees Celsius in the plant room, which is a little cooler than I would like it. I'd like to keep it kind of a minimum of 12 or maybe even 15 in here. But the good part is we got a sunny day today. So once the sun starts shining in the plant room, it'll warm up in here. Really nice. Down here in the basement, it's even cooler. It's 5 degrees Celsius. That's quite cool for these tropical and temperate trees. It's hard to believe in 2 days' time it's supposed to be 6 degrees and raining. Hard to believe. It dropped to minus 23 degrees Celsius last night, but the greenhouse was able to stay at minus 2 degrees Celsius. So it did freeze over lightly, but you know, probably the inside of the pots didn't freeze, just the outer kind of surface of the soil. Because my water didn't freeze over, it just had a light skim of ice on the top. So it's not too bad. And it's warmed up to 10 degrees now in the greenhouse. With the sun shining today, it'll probably get even higher. I've been keeping my eyes out to make sure things aren't leafing out in here. I noticed my lilac, it's got nice green buds on it, but they're definitely not leafing out, so that's good. I did notice on my larch tree in my larch forest down here, if I come in, everything's dormant except if I come in here, I can see one branch here has 2 little green buds showing on it. So that's not so good. Everything else is dormant on the trees. So just that one branch. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. Keep this greenhouse cold. What else have I noticed? Here, there's a bit of, I think it's privet or something. I'm not sure. It's just like a little seedling growing in this pot. It has leaves on it. Must be something very hardy. I don't think there's anything else. I did have that one larch tree down there. It was starting to show some green on it. And I put it down here where it's cooler. And it's just stayed the same. It hasn't developed any more. My Emmer maple down there, that had a few buds that were swelling on it, but I pruned those off and I moved it down to the colder floor of the greenhouse here. So that should be fine. Other than that, you know, everything looks good. The buds on the maples here, on the red maple, they're starting to swell, but they haven't come out or anything. So I think they're fine. You can see, yeah, there's a shot of the maple buds. So they're doing all right. Now we are getting that warm weather coming in 2 days with rain. So, you know, if it gets too warm in the greenhouse, I can always open the doors here. The overhead ventilation panels, they won't activate unless it's quite warm out. So they won't open up. So yeah, I could always leave the doors open a bit if it seems to be getting too hot in here. But most of the time it's cool. Like at nighttime, it cools right down. It's only on a warmer day when the sun is shining, it warms up in here to like, well, sometimes almost 20 degrees Celsius, which is quite warm, but you know, the pots stay cool. You take, you know, the mass of this pot here. This one is still just slightly frozen on top. It takes a long time to heat that pot up to, you know, room temperature. So in the greenhouse here, it only warms up for a couple hours in the afternoon to those nice temperatures, and then it cools right back down again. So the soil in the pot usually never kind of gets up to those warmer temperatures. It's like a heat sink. It just stays cold. And if they're frozen, they stay frozen for a long time. Like the ones in my poly house out there, you can get a lot of warm days in a row and the root base will still stay frozen in the pot. It takes a long time to warm that up. I'm going to work on my northern bog style forest today. It's on the floor of the greenhouse down here, so I'll get it out and we'll take a look at it. All right. There it is. Here's a look at my northern bog style forest. I put this forest together last spring from trees that Jonathan gave me, and some of the trees ended up in our edible forest and our First Nations garden. My northern bog style forest has come a long way since I first planted it. I've been pruning the trees to get that kind of slim conical form, especially to the black spruce in the background. The forest has 2 dead trees in it, 2 dead spruce trees that are sort of the main focus of the forest, which is kind of unusual, but you'll see a lot of bog forests like that with dead trees in the middle of the water. So I thought, yeah, it kind of adds a realistic touch to it. So today I'm going to clean it all up. You can see the moss is getting really long. I've got all my old needles from the larches from last year, and there's a lot of buds that are popping out. They're swelling up. And so I can see where I can do some rough pruning on the trees, where I can prune back some of the branches to some stronger buds, trying to get them, to that typical cylindrical, conical form that you see up north in the bogs. I'm going to start today's work by doing some weeding. So I'll pull out some of these weeds that have developed. I don't know what they are, but I've got that Irish moss in here. I got to get rid of that because that'll spread. Some branches that have fallen down, I'll get those out of there. Leaves and bark. I'm going to have to get all these needles out of here too. Yeah, that Irish moss is really... There, I got it out by the roots. See that? The roots go really deep into the soil. And it just spreads like crazy. Gets these little white flowers on it. So it's a good thing I got that out. You'd think with this dense covering of moss that it wouldn't grow in here, but it seems to be able to manage to grow anywhere. Luckily, there's not a lot of it. I'll be able to pick it out. And if you get too bad a covering of that Irish moss, the only thing you can do is repot your tree into new soil to get rid of it. It can get really thick. And those roots just develop a mat that makes it hard to get water down to your tree roots. So that's why I never grow it in my plantings. I know it's tempting because it looks nice, but very invasive, and it's hard to get rid of. Here's another clump of it right here. Got that by the roots. Sometimes you don't get it by the roots, it breaks off, but you just got to keep trying. You'll get it eventually. Next time it pops up, you pull it again, and hopefully you get it all out. And it's kind of like insects on your trees. If you keep up with it, if you remove any of that Irish moss when you first notice it, it won't spread. It's when you neglect your tree and it starts spreading and it covers the whole surface, and then it becomes a real problem. Really hard to deal with. But if it's just the odd little tuft here and there, if you get it in time, you pull it out, you stop it spreading, and you keep it under control. Here's another one here.
Now it's the same with the weeds. You know, if you pick them off when you first notice them, they don't spread. You can keep up with it, but if you kind of let your landscape go and it becomes all weedy, it makes it awfully hard to get it back under control. Almost impossible unless you repot it. So it's a good, you know, that's why landscapes like this or forests, they take a lot of time and maintenance to keep them looking good. You know, I really like forests and that, but I know I spend way more time on my forests than I do on my other bonsai just because they need it. They need landscape maintenance, tree maintenance. Otherwise, they just get out of control. It becomes too big a task to do. Now, I've got moss growing up the trunks of these dead trees, and in this case, I'm going to leave it because I think it looks cool. I won't have moss growing up the living trees. I'm going to prune that away because it'll destroy your bark texture. So I'll clean the moss away from the base of all these larches. And this moss sure has grown well. I watered this bog forest a lot because larches, these North American larches, they love water. And the black spruce love water. And the moss loves water. So everything in this forest loves lots of water. So I water it lots and fertilize it a lot. And it looks really healthy. The trees did amazing last year. So my whole goal, I want to keep the trees fairly miniature. I don't want to grow them into great big trees, but I want to get the profile, that conical shape, slimmer, a tighter, instead of a wide spreading cone, a very, very tight one if I can. Because if you look at trees up north, that's how they grow. They're very tight, conical forms. And it'll be a challenge to get that form, but I think once I get it, all these trees will look like little daggers pointing out of the soil. I think it'll really help give you that feeling of being up north. I'm getting all the needles out of the trees, the ones that are still stuck to the branches on the larches. And then I can clean them up from the forest floor. There's no point cleaning the forest floor if I've got more needles that are going to fall down. All the trees that I planted in this forest survived, which was amazing, because some of them had good root systems and some didn't. But they all managed to survive, which is just awesome that I got them all to live. And hopefully, you know, they'll all do well this year. I don't anticipate any problems with them, but you never know. You can see on this tree the moss has climbed up to some of the lower branches, so I've got to get that cleared out of there. Even though this bog forest was just created last year, it is one of my favorites. I just love the miniature look of it, and I think it'll just keep getting better as I work on it over the years. I've been working on clearing the moss from around the base of these trees, and now I've got to come in with my curved scissors and start pruning the moss. It's getting way too thick and kind of out of scale. So I'm going to prune it fairly short underneath the trees and then longer in the open areas to sort of represent grasslands. But I don't want it really thick under the trees because it'll be in the shade there anyway. And normally, you know, not much grows in the shade. Not tall grasses anyway, usually. And I might prune up some of these to look like moss bushes. I'm going to prune away the moss from the lip of the pot too. I just come in with the curved scissors and I just prune it away from the edge of the pot. So you can see the full lip of the pot. It always looks neater, like a picture frame. You don't have to worry about pruning the moss too far back because it'll grow again once, you know, spring comes and the rains. The moss will start growing like crazy. And I like to just, you know, do one little section of the forest at a time. Imagine you're a little person standing there and you look around and you want it to look realistic. So a variety of moss sizes, shapes. So it looks like a real forest. I like to make the moss in front of the tree trunk short too, so it doesn't block the root base of the tree. So I kind of have like a viewport into the roots of the tree. You don't want anything growing up in front of the roots, otherwise, you know, it's not going to look as miniature. When you get down low like this, you really see it looks like a forest. It's really cool. You can really see what to prune. What looks out of scale. Kind of really work towards that miniature forest look. So here's another tree here. So I'll need a view into the root base. So I've got to kind of cut my moss short in this area. So you can kind of look down and see the root base of the tree. Because the root base really adds to, you know, creating the look of a miniature tree. Yeah, you don't want it obvious that you've created a path in there. You want to kind of break it up with some bushes and that, so it looks very natural. That's just, you know, there's no right or wrong way of doing these forests, just what appeals to you. And I think, you know, it's important to be out in the actual full-size forests to get ideas and develop your eye for what looks natural in a forest and what doesn't. You know, if you've never been in a northern bog forest, then maybe you don't know what to style your trees to look like. But if you've been up north a lot and you've seen northern bog style forests, you kind of develop an eye for what looks natural in a forest of that type. So yeah, you know, going out for walks in the forest is a fantastic way to study trees and nature, and you develop all those ideas in miniature in your bonsai forests or penjing. This moss can represent ferns, you know, anything. This forest, unlike my larch forest, I want it to look like you're not invited to come in and walk around in it. You can see how I've left the moss kind of long in the middle between the trees. And I like that. It's like, you know, it's okay to walk around the perimeter of the forest, but you don't go in deep. And that's what a real forest is like. You know, you can't really walk in many forests. They're thick and overgrown. So I'm kind of liking that look with the long moss in the middle of the forest and kind of trimmed around the perimeter. So I'm just working away at all the moss, coming down, you know, at eye level here and looking and imagining this is a full-size forest, and then kind of pruning it accordingly to make it look even more realistic. Oh, I hear sirens. Could it be? Could it be the zombie apocalypse? I think keeping the lower branches on the trees, the ones that, you know, are just above the surface of the soil, also kind of add to that look of, you know, stay out of the forest. Like you're not invited in, because it would be very difficult to walk between the trees. There's all kinds of branches. And that's, you know, I've seen many a forest like that. There's just no pathway to walk in anywhere. So I was working away, cleaning up needles and that. And then over here, I noticed this tree at the end here is coming out in leaf or needles. that little larch on the end. It's the only tree in the whole forest that has green needles coming out on it. So I have no idea why, but it is. So I'm going to have to prune it because I can see what growth is coming out. You can see on some of the branches I can prune them back, which is good. And I'll just have to keep the forest in the greenhouse here. It's fairly well protected. Keep it cool, and hopefully all the rest will stay dormant. Yeah, that's about all I can do. Now usually, you know, even if they're at this stage and they get a frost, it usually doesn't damage them too badly. And if you do get a hard frost, I found that sometimes all these will die off, these buds, and then it'll start back budding. I don't know on a tree this small though. This one I would protect it. I wouldn't let it get a hard frost on it. So it'll stay in the greenhouse here, and I'll just have to keep it cool, try and keep it as dormant as possible, and that's all I can do. I am going to add a little trail to this forest, and not a trail for humans, but like a deer trail. So a very narrow one that deer would, you know, come through this area of the forest. So just be like a little, almost like a little ditch running through here. Very narrow, overgrown on the sides. Just, you know, wide enough for a deer to run through. So I'll start doing that. I'll just start pruning away the moss, little strips. I can have it wind through here a bit. And I should add a little bit of realism to the forest. So it comes in right here. Just take the moss out in that area. Sort of like that. Sort of like that, so it's, you know, a little narrow trail. And I'll just have the trail kind of wind and disappear out the back here. And this will grow in quickly, but I can keep trimming it in the future. You'll always see it there. And quite often you put a feature in a forest like this, and then at first it may not look totally natural, but then you give it a little bit of time and things start filling in, and it starts to take on a really natural look. Okay, I think that's looking quite nice. So I'm continuing to get the moss out from around the base of the trees. Stop it crawling up the trunks. I was thinking with my trail here, maybe I should have some interconnecting trails, some that go off in different directions, because you often see that in the woods, in the forests, that you see, you know, the intersection or the meeting place of two different trails. So I might do that. That would look kind of cool. Yeah, keep this moss under the trees really short. Again, I want a viewing angle to look in at the tree base from the front of the planting, so it'll be in this direction. Now I can see it's really climbing up this tree. All kinds of moss at the base here. Get that out. And this tree also has a lot of moss climbing up the trunk. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this forest develops this year. Year 2. It made way more progress in year 1 than I thought it would. I was able to prune it a lot more than I thought. Year 2, well, hopefully we can continue with good progress in getting these trees slimmed down to a conical form. Now I could grow these trees larger if I wanted to. If I can get them slimmed down so they're a very tight conical form, I could grow them taller and, you know, thicken up the trunks a bit. So we'll see. Maybe that's an option for the future. That way the trees would look even closer together, like a tightly packed forest. I added another deer path here so you can see I have the one on this side, one over here, and then they kind of meet and then go off. I think that looks good. Kind of breaks that front section up a bit too, adds some interest. Yeah, so I'm working away at this section now, getting the moss from around the base of the trees, pruning it a little shorter, the moss in some of the areas, cleaning up the trees. I've got a lot of pruning I'll have to do, which is good. I can get these larches slimmed out, and the spruce. I'm looking for buds on the spruce. Yeah, I see buds. Lots of them. Wow. That one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buds all coming, 6 buds all coming from one spot there. Wow. Yeah, a lot of buds. Gonna be an exciting year. You can see how high the moss had climbed up. Almost halfway up the trunks. You can see the wet spot where it was. Amazing. So yeah, I really took that moss down, and you can see trunks on the trees now. Now I did notice right in here, there's a bud on the second tree that's just starting to get a bit of green on the tip. Yeah. Well, I'll just keep it as cool as I can. It does help having it down here on the floor. It's a nice cool spot down here. I'm really enjoying doing this landscape work. It's really fun. The only trouble is that it is only 8 degrees out here in the greenhouse, and I'm getting really cold. So I'm gonna have to go in and warm up for a while. I'll show you what I've got, done on the forest. You can see the moss is all cleared away from these larches. I've got a deer path in there. Lots more work to go. I've only begun. Yeah, this might take me multiple days to get this forest done. I'll try and get back out here this afternoon. Hopefully the greenhouse will warm up a little once the sun hits it, which should be in another couple of hours. Maybe get it a little warmer in here. You can see it's all frosted up. Those are some really nice frost patterns up there too. Wow, they're really cool. Very feathery. Yeah, so we'll come back. I'll come back in a while, I'll have lunch, warm up, and hopefully it'll warm up in the greenhouse and I can come back out here and commence work on the bog forest. I'm back after lunch and it's much nicer in the greenhouse here now. It's gone up to 19 degrees Celsius, so that's not a bad temperature for working out here. It'd be a lot better than the cold I was working in this morning. So let's get to it. I'm going to turn the forest around and start working at the trees at the back, getting that moss cleared away around the trunks. So here I go. Like that. Wow, look at that clump of moss. That really grew. Yeah, so now I can get to all this moss that's around the base of these trees. Clear that away so it doesn't climb up the trunk. I see more of that Irish moss at the back here. Get that out. A few more weeds in here. These weeds look nice when they're small like this, but generally weeds grow up to be huge. So it's best to pick them out when they are young before the roots get established. That makes it a lot easier to do your weeding. If you wait until they're giant weeds, they got this huge root system and very difficult to get out. Oh, there's some more Irish moss here. Now I'll clean up around the lip of the pot. It's always nice to make the back of your planting look as presentable as the front. That includes cleaning the moss off around the lip of the pot here. Just pruning it back. That moss was really thick. You can see it was up to here, and here's the level of the soil. Good couple of centimeters thick, I'd say. It is absolutely beautiful in the greenhouse right now. Sun's shining in, it's warmed up. I still have my jacket on, but it's a lot nicer than it was this morning. You can see there's a larch tree that has a branch that's reaching out, right out to the spruce. Another one here. It's even got green needles on it still. That'll have to be trimmed back. While I can see the back of the trees here, I'm going to do some pruning. Some of those crossing branches. So there was a spot here. I could prune this back. Shorten this branch. I'll have to come right back to here, I think. I will try it here. See if a bud develops. If not, I can prune it back to a shorter branch. Or prune it back shorter. Now there's a larch reaching out here. I've got to prune it back, so I'll take that branch off there, taking that long tip out. And there's another one growing out here, so I'll take it off here. Taking that off. That gets rid of some of those intersecting branches. So I can't do, too much pruning until it starts leafing out, but I can get rid of some of the real obvious areas that can use a bit of pruning. Here's a branch facing the other tree. I can take that out. Give a little air circulation between the two trees. Yeah, this one I can definitely shorten back. It's got all kinds of branching coming off of it. So I will take off the tip like that. Prune that back. If you look at this spruce branch here, I've got lots of buds at the tip, but I've also got back budding down lower on the branch. So once it starts turning green, these buds start shooting out, I can prune the whole top off that branch and develop these buds down lower. I'm going to do a little shaping to this ball of moss here. Kind of get a little trimmer. It's getting a little large. So I'll prune it back. It'll look a little brown, but it'll green up again once it gets some rain on it. That's looking better. Now it's getting a little close to the tree behind it here, so I'm going to have to prune part of that back too. All right, I think I'll flip it back around and go to the front view again and keep working away. Yeah, I can get rid of the winter jacket too. It's kind of nice now. Well, I'm back to the front and I'll continue clearing away moss from around some of these trees. It's nice to know the moss has been growing really well. Seems to like it in here. It's tricky getting into these trees. The only thing I can reach is these long tweezers. It's like working on a ship in a bottle. Gotta reach in there and try and get the moss away. Well, it's certainly looking like a miniature world now. Liking this. The sun is getting lower on the horizon. I made a lot of progress with my bog forest today, my mixed planting, larch trees and black spruce trees. And yeah, I got all that moss cleared away from around the trunks. I got my moss pruned down. I put a few little deer pathways in there. I did a little bit of pruning. I haven't done much pruning yet because I'm going to wait until both the spruce and the larch are flushing out with new growth. And then I can see which buds are alive and what I can prune back to. But yeah, a lot of progress today. I'm hoping that last night was the last really cold night of winter. I'm hoping it slowly kind of starts warming up a bit until spring. I've still got a couple more months before it warms up, but I've definitely got spring fever, that's for sure. I made a lot of progress on my larch and spruce bog forest today, getting it kind of pruned up. There'll be more work coming on it in spring when I go to prune the trees. But that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.